Years ago, I worked the evening shift at a small laundromat just on the outskirts of town. The place was old, its walls stained yellow from years of heat and humidity. The floor tiles were cracked, the vending machines barely worked, and half the washing machines were out of order. Still, people came and went, most of them keeping to themselves, heads down, waiting for their laundry cycles to finish. It wasn't a bad job. The hours were long, but I got paid hourly, and my boss was rarely around. The place was usually quiet at night, and aside from the occasional late-night straggler, I mostly had the place to myself. I'd sweep the floors, wipe down the counters, and kill time listening to an old radio behind the counter. But there was one night I could never forget. It was late, probably around 11 p.m. The air outside was thick, the kind of summer heat that makes the air feel heavy. The laundromat was completely empty, and the only sounds were the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant chirping of crickets outside. I had just finished wiping down the folding tables when I noticed something odd. One of the washing machines, the one in the very back corner, was running. I knew for a fact that no one had been in to start it. I would have heard them. The chime that played when the front door opened had been silent for at least an hour. But somehow, the machine was running, the clothes inside, tumbling over themselves in slow, hypnotic rotations. I stood there for a long moment, just listening to the rhythmic thudding of wet clothes hitting the sides of the drum. Maybe someone had started it earlier and forgotten about it. But as I stepped closer, a deep unease settled in my stomach. The machine's glass door was fogged over, condensation dripping down the inside, but I could still make out the clothing inside. Only it wasn't clothing. The more I stared, the more the shapes became clear. Something pale, something too smooth to be fabric, rolled against the glass. A hand. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The machine rumbled, the sound shifting into something deeper, almost like a groan. My mind raced through 100 different possibilities. A prank? A trick of the light? But no matter how I tried to explain it, I couldn't ignore the sickening certainty that what I was seeing was real. I turned and bolted back to the front counter, fumbling for my phone. I was about to call my boss when I heard the noise, a long, slow creak. The washing machine door was opening. I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen. My eyes darted back to the machine just in time to see the door swing open completely. A thick, wet sound filled the laundromat as something spilled out onto the floor. A dark, crumpled mass. For a moment, everything was still. My breath came in shallow gasps, my heart hammering so loudly I thought it might burst. Then, it moved. A hand, slick and pale, twitched against the linoleum. And then, slowly, deliberately, it began to push itself upright. I saw the glisten of wet skin, the unnatural angles of limbs that didn't seem to fit together properly. The head lolled forward, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel it looking at me. The radio behind me crackled, its static swelling into something distorted and garbled, like a voice trying to form words, but failing. The thing twitched again, and a choked, gurgling sound escaped its throat. It was trying to speak. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I sprinted for the door, shoving it open so hard the glass rattled in its frame. The night air hit me like a wall, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I ran until my lungs burned, until the laundromat was nothing but a glowing rectangle in the distance. Only then did I stop, my entire body trembling. I don't know how long I stood there gasping for breath, staring back at the place where something impossible had just happened. Eventually, I convinced myself to call the police. I told them someone had broken in, that I had been too scared to check who it was. They arrived within minutes, Searching the building from top to bottom, they found nothing. No wet footprints, no broken machine door, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I quit that night, left my keys on the counter, and never stepped foot in that laundromat again. My boss was furious, but I didn't care. Whatever had happened that night, whatever I had seen, was something I never wanted to experience again. To this day, I still don't know what it was. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe exhaustion had warped my perception of reality. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass by an old laundromat or hear the steady hum of a washing machine, I remember that moment. And I wonder, did I really get away? The diner was nearly empty, just the way I liked it during my night shifts. The hum of the neon sign outside, the occasional clatter of silverware against a plate, the rhythmic tick of the clock above the register, all of it made for an oddly comforting routine. That night started like any other. The regulars had filtered out by 2 a.m., leaving only me behind the counter and a lone man in the corner booth, nursing a black coffee that he hadn't touched in over an hour. He was quiet, barely moving, his long fingers tracing slow, deliberate circles on the table. I tried not to stare, but something about him unsettled me. His clothes were just slightly outdated, the kind you'd see in old photographs, buttoned too tight at the collar, fabric slightly yellowed with age, and his face, pale, almost waxy, with dark eyes that didn't blink nearly enough. At around 3 a.m., the bell above the door jingled. I turned, expecting another late-night trucker, or someone needing a place to sober up. Instead, a woman walked in. Or at least, I thought she was a woman. She was tall and thin, too thin, her limbs moving with an odd stiffness, like a marionette being tugged along by invisible strings. Her hair hung limp over her face, masking her features. She didn't approach the counter, didn't acknowledge me at all. Instead, she walked straight to the man in the booth and stood there, silent. The air in the diner seemed to shift, growing thick, heavy. I swallowed hard. "Can I get you something, ma'am?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. She didn't answer. The man in the booth slowly lifted his head, his gaze meeting her son. He smiled. It was a slow, unnatural stretch of his lips, as if the muscles in his face were learning how to move for the first time. The woman responded by tilting her head in an unnatural jerk, her hair slipping back slightly. What I saw beneath it made my stomach drop. Her face, if you could call it that, was stretched and wrong, as though someone had taken human features and rearranged them. Her mouth was too wide, her eyes sunken, her skin grayish and taut over her bones. I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. The man stood up without breaking eye contact with her, and then, as if on cue, every light in the diner flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping wildly across the diner. They were gone. The booth was empty. No sign of either of them. Just the untouched coffee and a deep, lingering cold that settled into my bones. I barely had time to catch my breath before I heard it. The sound of the door creaking open. Slowly. I turned the light toward the entrance, expecting to see someone walking out. Instead, the door was open just enough to show the pitch-black night outside. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting long, twitching shadows across the floor. And then, footsteps. Not outside. Not walking away. They were coming closer. From behind me, I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. The flashlight trembled in my grasp as I swept it across the diner. The booths were empty. The counter was just as I'd left it. But the kitchen door, the one that led to the storage room and the back exit, was slowly swinging shut. I hadn't heard it open. My legs felt rooted to the spot, but every nerve in my body screamed at me to move. My feet finally obeyed, carrying me toward the kitchen, though every step felt like I was wading through thick molasses. My hand reached for the door, my fingers trembling as they pressed against the cold metal surface. I pushed it open. The kitchen was dark, save for the faint glow of the emergency light near the back. The room smelled of grease and old coffee. The exit door stood closed, the handle gleaming under the dim light. Then, something shifted. A soft scrape, like a shoe sliding against tile. I jerked the flashlight toward the noise, the beam catching movement near the supply shelves. A shadow, impossibly tall, stretched unnaturally against the wall. My pulse pounded as I backed away slowly, my mind racing. A whisper, faint and breathy, slithered through the room. "Watch me!" The words were barely audible, but they sent a bolt of terror through me. I turned and bolted, shoving it through the swinging door, nearly slipping as I ran for the front of the diner. The neon light flickered violently now, casting the room in eerie flashes of red and white. I reached the entrance, my shaking hands fumbling with the lock. The reflection in the glass made my stomach lurch. The man and the woman stood just behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't breathe. I wrenched the door open and sprinted outside, the cold night air hitting me like a wall. My car was parked just a few feet away, but the distance felt endless. My footsteps pounded against the pavement as I fumbled with my keys, every second stretching unbearably long. I threw myself into the car, locking the doors in a frenzy. My breath came in ragged gasps as I dared one final glance toward the diner. The door was shut. The neon sign buzzed, steady again. Inside, the booths were empty. The counter was just as I had left it, like nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I turned the key in the ignition with trembling hands, peeling out of the parking lot without looking back. I never went back to that diner. I never even drove past it again. Some nights, though, when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear it, that whisper. Watch me. The Blackthorn Hotel was never warm. No matter how high I cranked the radiator, the cold always found its way in, seeping through the walls, curling under the door, pressing against my skin like something alive. The heat from the old pipes stank of rust and mildew, hissing in protest every time I tried to coax it higher. The lobby was a relic of a forgotten time. Dark wood, peeling wallpaper, a chandelier that should have been beautiful, but wasn't. It hung like a rotting corpse of brass, flickering with just enough light to make the shadows seem deeper. The air always smelled faintly of dust and old paper, like a place that had been abandoned yet refused to die. Midnight had come and gone. The last guest of the night had checked in hours ago. A businessman with bloodshot eyes, his face gray with exhaustion. He didn't speak, just slid his credit card across the desk and took his key without waiting for pleasantries. He didn't even ask for directions to his room. Just walked to the elevator, stiff and silent, like a man moving towards something he already knew was waiting for him. I watched the numbers climb, 3, 4, 5, and then they stopped. I frowned, glancing at the guest ledger. Room 512 was marked as vacant. Then the phone rang. It startled me, my pulse leaping in my throat. The old rotary barely worked, but it sounded off like an alarm, echoing through the empty lobby. I hesitated for 3 rings, then slowly I lifted the receiver. Front desk. Silence, a static crackle. Then a wet, rattling breath. I'd like to check out. The voice was wrong, like it wasn't coming through the phone, but from something deeper, something thick, as if the sound had to push through water or something worse. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Sir, you'll need to come down to the desk for that." A sickening, choked laugh, wet, broken. "I can't." The line clicked dead. For a moment, I just stood there, the receiver pressed against my ear, listening to the dull hum of the dial tone. My fingers felt stiff when I finally set it down. Then the elevator dinged. I turned, slowly. The elevator stood open, empty. But the air that rolled out was freezing. I should have called the manager, should have walked away. But something in me, the stupid human need to know, dragged me forward. I stepped inside. The door shut behind me. The elevator didn't move. I pressed the lobby button. Nothing. Then the 5th floor. The numbers began ticking upward. 2, 3, 4, 5. The doors slid open. The hallway stretched ahead, long and dark. The carpet was stained, torn at the edges. The wallpaper bubbled with damp, curling like old skin. And at the end of the hall, room 512. Its door was ajar. Something waited beyond it. I shouldn't have gone, but I did. The room was black, curtains drawn. The only light seeped from beneath the bathroom door, thin and sickly. Something moved inside. A shadow passed against the light. My breath caught. A shadow moved across the thin gap at the bottom of the door. And then, a sound. A guttural, wet exhale. Something struggling to breathe. The bathroom door creaked open. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. The elevator was still open. Still waiting. I lunged inside, hammering the close button. The doors began sliding shut. Then, a hand, pale, too long, fingers curling around the edge of the door frame. The doors slammed shut. The elevator dropped. I pressed myself against the wall, heart slamming in my chest. The descent slowed. A final shuddering stop. The doors slid open. The warm glow of the lobby. The distant tick of the grandfather clock. I didn't look back. I grabbed my coat, left the keys on the desk. I never went back to the Blackthorn Hotel, but it's still there, still taking guests. If you work the night shift there and get a call from the 5th floor in the middle of the night, don't answer.